John of the Eye Patch, Chapter 14. John slept fitfully that night, full of dreams of smoking blackbeards, smart-talking parrots, cutlasses, pistols, and a pirate ship that could jump over sandbars. Anne was in his dream too, whispering to him, "Don't go!" Just before he leapt off the wall of the fort, he flew over the tent village to the top of the Dragon of Plunder, where he perched on the mast like a hawk, and he surveyed the harbor and the island around himself. And then came the pistol shots. Bang, bang, bang! He looked to the docks and he saw Blackbeard, who continued to pull guns out of his chest, and he continued to shoot at John. The bullet struck the mast, causing it to break in half and fall. John fell towards the sea. That's when he sat up in his bed. He was breathing heavily, and he grabbed the eye patch off of his nightstand. Was this whole thing a dream? Was this whole pirate adventure just a dream? He hesitated before putting on the eye patch. What if it wasn't a dream? They had gone out to sea when he pulled the eye patch off. Would he return to the same place and fall into the sea? Or would he be back on the ship, wherever the ship was? If it wasn't a dream, how does this whole thing work? Did I just trap myself here in the present? John wondered. No better way to know than to put the eye patch on. If he fell into the water, he could always pull it back off and return home like nothing had happened. Shoes. Just in case he's on the ship, he's going to want shoes, he thought. He laced up his shoes, his Converse. John took a deep breath, like he was preparing to jump into a swimming pool, and he slipped on the eye patch. He blinked and he found himself in the tiny closet of a room that he'd last been on when he was on the Dragon of Plunder. He let out a breath and a laugh. I'm alive, still on the ship. It's not a dream. He stumbled out of the closet into the main deck of the ship. The sun was up and the sky was already pale blue. The time had changed. He glanced around to see they had dropped anchor and they were in a sheltered cove. Trees hid them from the open sea. "Oh boy, we be looking for you." It was the voice John had remembered from his first visits to the island. Kofi. He was accompanied by Sean, a colorfully dressed pirate, who wore a pink silk shirt and a purple vest and pants that were striped red and blue. What are you two doing here?" John asked. Would this mate be the cook?" Sean said, pointing at Kofi. "And this hearty be the boatswain," Kofi said, pointing at Sean. "Couldn't I find you anywhere last night at supper?" Sean said. "I went to bed early," John said. Honest enough. Both men ambled closer to John. "And now ye's be wearing a treasure map," Sean said. John was still in his pajamas. They were black and white with lines depicting islands, ship routes, and several X's that marked the spot. And of course, a treasure chest. Let me just go get dressed," John said, and he turned back to the closet. "No, did crew be wanting ya?" Kofi said. "As cabin be, your job is to be getting the food," Sean said. And so John sighed. "Okay, what do I need to do?" "Boy, D for the castle it waits for ya." Kofi led John towards the bow of the ship. John wasn't quite sure what Kofi had said. A door led from the main deck to the forecastle. It opened with a groaning squeak of metal hinges. A horrible stink of mold, mildew, and sweat wafted out of the open door. John breathed through his mouth and went inside. The first thing John noticed was entering heat and humidity in this room. The second thing he noticed, before his eyes adjusted to the dim light, was the very low ceiling with crossbeams, one of which John banged his head against. "Gonna have to duck when I'm in here," he thought. While this place, the forecastle, was longer than the captain's quarters, its forward position required the walls to curve inward to meet the bow of the ship. Pirates, dozen on the hammocks, suspended between the low beams, while The floor beneath was covered with well-organized piles of fishing gear, rods, nets, rope, and folded sails. Near the door was a small brick oven. It was topped by a sheet of metal and several holes cut where pots could sit for cooking. You need to keep wood in the fire? Kofi pointed to a stack of wood covered by wet nets and ropes. Dry pieces work best. John squatted by the pile and began searching through the stack for any log that was even close to dry. After a few dozen greener pieces, he found a small cluster of dry logs in the middle of the stack. He handed one of them to Kofi, who grunted. He opened the iron door and he tossed the log inside. No, you need to fetch the eggs, Kofi said. Where's the refrigerator? John asked. What be a refrigerator? Kofi asked. You know, the place where you keep things cold. John realized, of course, there'd be no electricity on this ship, and no way to have an appliance like in a refrigerator. He tried to remember when electricity was invented. His best guess was maybe not for another 100 or 200 years. The eggs will be down in the hold, Kofi said. The hold? John pointed a wood spatula at the door. Don't worry, I'll show you, Sean said, and John followed him out to the main deck where Sean heaved open a hatch leading below deck. John peered through the hatch into the gloom below. Go on, get down there, Sean said. How many eggs should I get? Oh, get as many as they be. John looked at the pirate, but it seemed no more help was going to come from him, so John just climbed down below deck into the hold. The ceiling was even low there, even lower than the forecastle, and John ducked enough so that he wouldn't hit his head for the second time this morning. Where am I going to find eggs, he thought, looking around in the darkness. Then he heard the cluck of chickens. Live chickens? There's chickens down here? John climbed over heaps of equipment, and he reached the chicken coops. In some places, the boxes and crates were packed so tight, John had to squeeze through gaps no bigger than his head. No wonder they want a cabin boy. A grown man couldn't squeeze through these areas to get to the chickens. The further he went from the hatch to the main deck, the less light followed him, heaving him, leaving him to twist and turn through the maze of goods, more by touch and sound than he was moving by sight. Chicken coops were along the side of the hold where the floor curved up to the wall. John inspected them by touch. He found small metal hatches that were just large enough for his hand. He opened the first coop and he reached inside, but then he remembered the pecks and bites of chickens when he broke the stacks of coops in Nassau. Good chickens, nice chickens, he whispered to the clucking hens. His hand approached a nesting chicken, scattering the bird in a storm of barracks. John found an egg in the nest. He made a simple basket by pulling the bottom of his pajama shirt up to store the egg. Together, he found half a dozen eggs. Scrambling back out of the hold was more difficult because he had eggs in his shirt. But John went slowly and carefully, and then he reached the ladder without dropping a single one of the eggs. Eggs, Sean asked with his hand held out. The eggs weren't enough to fully satisfy Kofi's needs. John returned to the hold to find flour for biscuits, the ripest of the plantains, and a cupful of lard that would, in Kofi's minds, soften the hardtack to keep your teeth from mutiny against your tongue. With Kofi well supplied to make breakfast, John climbed the ladder to the quarterdeck where he found his mom examining the coastline with a brass spyglass. John, we're at anchor. There's no need to have come back, she said, without even turning to face him. How'd you know it was me? Your shoes squeak on the deck. His mom compacted the spyglass and turned to face him, her head tilted towards one shoulder. Rubber shoes aren't invented yet, John. And the ones with soles, they don't do well in wet environments. And remember, Nike's not invented, neither is Converse. John looked down at his shoes. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Regardless, we're stuck in this cove, so you might as well go home. She tucked the spyglass into her waist sash. What do you mean, stuck? John bounced nervously from foot to foot. Well, John, it's your fault, really. My fault? Well, you gave control back to Blackbird, and Blackbird, and as soon as we outran the Queen Anne's Revenge, he had us find the most sheltered cove so we could drop anchor, and now he refuses to take us back to sea. So, we're stuck here in this cove. Did you try talking to him? John asked. John, he's not going to listen to me. She squinted at John and then turned her head towards her shoulder. On the other hand, me. You want me to talk to Blackbird? Yes. Yes, John, I want you to do it. Why would he listen to me? He seems to trust you, she said. John left his mom on the quarterdeck and went to the captain's quarters to speak to Blackbird. The doors to the quarters were open wide, and a dozen pirates surrounded the captain's deck, some standing, some squatting, some sitting on the floor. They ate biscuits and gravy and drank from tin cups. Blackbird was among them. Ha ha! Lad, you're just in time for the breaking of the fast. For breakfast. Kofi scooped gravy-laden biscuits out of a pot and dropped them into a tin bowl for John. Is there a fork or a spoon? Look at the fancy lad, thinking we're on a ship made of gold. Blackbird laughed. Fancy lad, his parrot parroted. John glanced around and he saw that the pirates used their bare, dirty hands to eat the gravy-covered biscuit. He shrugged and decided to go along with it. A single bite of the bland flour-tasting biscuit and lard gravy changed his mind. He left the biscuit in the bowl and he navigated around, gathered the pirates to sit. He left his biscuit in the bowl, navigated around the gathered pirates, and sat by Blackbird. Oh my gosh, this sentence. He left his biscuit in the bowl and navigated around the gathered pirates to sit by Blackbird. Shouldn't we be looking for treasure, Captain? Treasure smeasure, Blackbird said. We won't be doing anything without a hearty meal to break our fast. He nodded towards John's nearly untouched biscuit. Go on. What's wrong? You don't like it? He leaned in and whispered to John. Don't worry. None of us like it, but don't tell. It's okay. I'll just eat later, John said. At home, he thought. Later? Even cabin boys can eat with us men. It's not like we want you to starve, Blackbird said. Dang it, no escaping it. John took another bite of the bland biscuit. He struggled to swallow the overly dry pastry, and he managed a slight smile of victory when he did. Ha ha, there's a good lad. Blackbird slapped John on the back. After breakfast, we're going to start looking, right? Blackbird stuffed the last of his gravy-covered biscuit into his mouth. Some of the flakes of white biscuit escaped and tumbled into his beard. Oh yeah, that worthless chest you want. Worthless chest? Worthless chest? It's not worthless. It's my mom's way home, John thought. Not that he could tell Blackbird that. How bad you want it? I'm starting to think I shouldn't have agreed to let you have it, Blackbird said, and he brushed the crumbs out of his beard, and he let them fall down to the ground where the parrot could peck at them. It doesn't matter how badly I want it. John put his bowl on the desk and he faced Blackbird so he could talk low enough so the other pirates wouldn't hear. None of us are getting anything if we stay here, he said. Blackbird leaned towards John, the parrot coming close enough that John could smell the bird's dander. Blackbird managed to match John's conspiratorial tone and said, We're waiting here so Blackbeard calms down and forgets about us.